It wasn't supposed to be anything more than a gamble. A rusty old shipping container sold off at the county auction for less than the price of a new set of tires. $300. That's what Jack Reynolds paid, and that's what changed his life forever. At the time, he thought it was just a deal, maybe even a lucky break. In small towns across Texas, auctions like this weren't unusual. Ranchers clearing out barns, storage companies emptying unpaid units, the occasional trucker unloading equipment. Containers always drew a crowd because folks loved the mystery. Some people struck gold, tools, antiques, collectibles. Others got nothing but scrap metal and mouse nests. But Jack didn't walk into that gravel lot with dreams of treasure. He was just tired. Tired of bills stacking up on the kitchen counter. Tired of working 12-hour days at the mechanic's shop and still coming home wondering how he'd keep the lights on. Tired of being 35 and feeling like life had already decided he'd be small and broke forever. The container sat at the far end of the auction yard, streaked with rust, the paint so faded you couldn't even tell what company's logo had once been stamped on its side. A heavy padlock hung from the latch, orange with corrosion. Nobody seemed interested. Nobody but Jack and Coda. The German Shepherd stood tall beside him, a black and tan powerhouse of muscle and intelligence. Retired from the K-9 unit 2 years earlier, Coda had been Jack's closest companion ever since. The bond between them was iron strong, born from loyalty, training, and something deeper Jack couldn't put into words. When the auctioneer called for bids, nobody raised a hand. Nobody, until Jack surprised even himself. 300. The crowd barely looked up. The auctioneer shrugged, slammed the gavel, and that was it. Jack had just bought himself a 30-foot steel box for the price of a month's groceries. And in that moment, he had no idea that what was locked inside would haunt him for the rest of his life. The drive home was quiet, except for the occasional rattle of the container chained to the flatbed trailer. Jack's truck labored on the highway, the Texas sun dropping low and washing the fields in gold. Coda sat in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears twitching in the wind. But every now and then, he'd glance back, eyes narrowing toward the rattling cargo. Jack noticed. "You don't like it, huh, boy?" he said. Coda gave a low grunt. Not quite a growl, but not comfortable either. It wasn't the first time Jack trusted Coda's instincts. When the dog was still in service, he'd found missing kids, sniffed out narcotics, even warned officers of hidden weapons before they saw them. If Coda was uneasy about something, there was usually a reason. But Jack brushed it off. It's just junk in there, maybe some old farm tools. Still, a small, nagging thought dug at the back of his mind. By the time they rolled into Jack's driveway, the sky was turning violet. His modest house sat on the edge of Clearwater, a town most folks drove through without noticing. The yard wasn't much, just dry grass, a couple of pecan trees, and the skeleton of an old barn. Jack parked, unhitched the trailer, and stood staring at the container. Coda paced, circling it like a wolf sizing up prey. His hackles weren't raised, but his ears stayed pinned forward, alert. Jack grabbed a flashlight and walked up to the padlock. It was thick, but the shank had corroded. He could break it. He knew he could. Part of him itched to swing the crowbar right then and there. But another part hesitated. Something about the silence, the way the air felt heavier around the container, made his palms sweat. Instead, he went inside, grabbed a beer, and sat at the kitchen table. Coda lay by the back door but never took his eyes off the yard. That night, Jack dreamed in fragments. A banging sound, chains rattling, children's laughter, then crying. He woke up in a cold sweat, the dog sitting upright beside the bed, staring toward the backyard. "Fine," Jack muttered, throwing off the covers. "We'll open it tomorrow." But tomorrow came too quickly. The next afternoon after work, Jack dragged the crowbar across the yard. Coda trotted beside him, tail stiff, nose twitching. The padlock gave way in less than a minute, snapping open with a squeal that made Jack's teeth ache. The doors groaned as they swung apart. Dust billowed out, choking the air. Inside, shadows stretched over heaps of junk. Old chairs, boxes, a roll of carpet. At first glance, nothing sinister. Just the kind of mess you'd expect from someone who treated a container like an attic. Jack let out a laugh, more relief than humor. "Well, boy, looks like we got ourselves $300 worth of garbage." Coda didn't laugh. He moved forward, nose low, every step calculated. His body language shifted from wary to rigid. The kind of tension Jack had seen when the dog scented narcotics hidden in vehicles. And then he barked, sharp, loud, echoing off the steel walls. Jack jumped. The bark wasn't random, it was aimed at a tarp in the far corner. Coda, heel. The dog ignored him, pawing at the tarp, teeth pulling at the fabric until it slid back. Jack's flashlight beam hit metal. A trunk, large, chained shut. He froze. His first thought was simple. It's just storage. People kept trunks, old family stuff. But the second thought came too fast. Why chain it shut? Jack crouched, fingers brushing the cold iron links. His stomach turned. Something about the way the chains dug into the trunk, as though someone wanted to make absolutely sure it stayed closed, made him uneasy. Coda growled, low and steady. Jack stood up, heart hammering. Not tonight, he whispered, more to himself than to the dog. We'll deal with it tomorrow. But even as he closed the container doors and snapped a new lock into place, he knew tomorrow would only bring more questions and maybe answers he didn't want. And this is where the story truly begins. Jack thought he'd spent $300 on scrap metal. What he didn't know was that he had just opened the door to something much darker, something that would pull him and Coda into a mystery buried for years. Morning came hot and glaring, a Texas sun already burning the mist off the fields when Jack rolled out of bed. He'd slept with one ear open because Coda had slept with both. The dog had stayed on high alert all night. No pacing, no whining, just that calm, coiled readiness Jack recognized from the years Coda spent on duty. When a trained canine goes quiet and watchful, it isn't nothing. It's the kind of quiet that knows how to wait. Jack fried 2 eggs and overcooked the toast. Coda waited for the last corner, the ritual both of them understood without words. At the back door, before Jack headed out to the shop, the dog didn't glance at the trees or the road. He stared through the glass toward the rectangle of weathered steel parked in the yard. Jack followed his gaze, pressing the heel of his coffee cup against the kitchen counter to stop his hand from shaking. We're not doing this before work, he said. We'll look again later. Coda didn't blink. Later, Jack repeated, then forced himself to pull his eyes away. At the shop, the day was a blur of oil changes, squeaky belts, a radiator hose that refused to seal. Customers came in dusty and left only slightly less dusty. Country radio murmured from a speaker with a cracked cone. Old man Lafferty told the same joke he always told. Life in Clearwater pretended to be normal, and Jack pretended along with it. Only one thing broke through the routine. Every time the bay door rattled and light flashed on chrome, Jack saw that container in his head. He tried to tell himself it was just the thrill of the unknown, the kind of curiosity that made people bid on locked closets and storage lockers. But the feeling wasn't excitement. It was dread. It sat right behind his sternum and wouldn't budge. He cut out early. The guys didn't tease him about it. They'd seen the shadows under his eyes. He swung by the feed store for dog food, then turned down the gravel road toward his place, a plume trailing behind the truck like a flag. Coda met him at the door, tail wagging once, twice, then stilling, as if remembering the thing in the yard. He padded out ahead of Jack, stopping at the container's doors, nose stretched forward, inhaling the seam where steel met steel. The dog's whole body leaned toward whatever was inside, like a compass needle settling on north. Okay, Jack muttered, we're doing this right. He grabbed gloves, a flashlight, and a pry bar. The new padlock clicked off the latch, and the big doors swung out. Dust unfurled in a gray sheet. The same mess stared back. A roll of carpet slumped like a dead seal, a fan missing a blade, boxes collapsed inward, furniture stacked wrong. Still just junk. Still an old man's attic without the attic. Back, Jack said, and Coda gave him exactly 6 inches of space. They started at the front. Jack cracked open a box stuffed with sweaters that smelled like camphor in long-closed rooms. He tugged out a winter cap with a palm on top, the kind of thing no one in Clearwater needed unless a rare cold front trucked in from Oklahoma. He set it aside, then found a second box marked with a shaky black Sharpie. Kitchen. Inside, mismatched silverware, 3 chipped plates, a pan with a dent shaped like a fist. Coda, Jack pointed. Take scent. The command was old, but it still worked. Coda lowered his muzzle into the box and breathed, long and steady. Nothing. He left it without interest. The third box was different. It looked like the others, tape dried, corners soft, but the weight surprised Jack. He expected kitchen knickknacks and found something dense and tightly packed. He sliced the tape and peeled back the flaps. Inside lay photo albums, 6 of them, fat with plastic sleeves, their fake leather covers scuffed and peeling at the edges. A smell rose up that sent a tiny ripple through Jack's memory. Photo paper and adhesive. That sticky, sweet scent of his mother's scrapbook table when he was a boy, and she'd tried to keep Christmases and first days of school captured forever. Pictures, he said aloud, trying out the harmlessness of the word. Just pictures. Coda didn't agree. The dog's ears pressed forward and his tail dropped level, not tucked, not wagging, just focused. He leaned in, sniffed low over the first album, then gave a short, sharp bark. Jack's mouth went dry. He eased the top album into his hands and flipped it open. On the first page, a girl around 7, strawberry blonde hair pulled tight into a ponytail, eyes red from crying or from the way old cameras burned with flash. She stood in a hallway whose thin carpet had a pattern Jack recognized from budget motels. The date printed in the corner was a decade old. No name, just the weirded, flat stare of a child trying to hold still while someone told her to hold still. He turned a page. Another child, different kid, same hallway. Turned again. Another, same. Some were blurry, like whoever took them hadn't bothered to focus or didn't care. He told himself it was a foster parent keeping records, or a social worker who didn't know how to file. He told himself anything that made it boring and safe. Album 2, Children Again. Some on a bedspread patterned with seashells, a cheap lamp in the corner, a TV bolted to a dresser. The angles were wrong. The kids were often off-center, as if whoever held the camera never looked through it, just pointed and clicked and moved on. By the time he reached album 3, Jack's hands had started to tremble. He set it down, pressing his palm on the cover as if closing it could keep whatever it contained from getting out. He wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist. Maybe it's... His voice failed. He didn't know what he was trying to name. Normal? Harmless? He looked at Coda because the dog had never lied to him. Coda didn't blink. He lifted a paw, placed it on the edge of the next box, and dug. The tape came loose under his nails. Jack pulled it open. More albums. A whole second layer. And beneath those, a shoebox full of loose photos. The edges curled, some stuck together as if they'd been wet at one point and dried the wrong way. He lifted one and turned it gently. On the back, in a blocky hand, someone had written a pair of letters and a number. NT12. Underneath, a date. Jack didn't know what NT meant. Initials, a place, a code. He set the photo down and took another. MT9, another date, same year. The light had shifted while he worked. The container swallowed the afternoon, made it feel later than it was. Jack glanced toward the open doors and saw the yard in a bright rectangle, the pecan leaves starting to move with a wind he hadn't noticed picking up. He heard Coda before he saw him move. A low rumble, the engine idle sound of a bomb warning the world. Jack turned. The rumble aimed not at the albums but deeper, past collapsed chairs and the roll of carpet, toward that corner where the tarp lay folded back to reveal the trunk. The chains wrapping the trunk weren't decorative. They were thick, running through the handles and around the body like someone had been afraid the lid would spring open on its own. The padlock was heavy and old, scarred by pliers or bolt cutters at some point in his life. Jack had known it was strange last night. Today, it felt like a stop sign. Coda, he said quietly. Leave it. Coda didn't leave it. He walked to the trunk, pressed his nose to the chain, then the seam where lid met box. He inhaled in short bursts, then longer, deeper. He sat. He looked at Jack. He had that look trained dogs get when their nose tells them a truth their human hasn't decided to hear. Jack knuckled sweat off his forehead. We're not opening that, not yet. He pivoted back to the boxes, to something he might be able to explain. In a half-crushed banker's box, he found a spiral notebook with the first 10 pages torn out. On page 11, a grocery list. Bread, milk, batteries. Below it, a different handwriting. A careful, upright script added 3 items and circled them. Cash envelopes, prepaid phone, map. The date sat in the corner, 3 summers back. He looked for names. He didn't find any. He found receipts from the same month. A hardware store 2 towns over. A motel up on Highway 84. A gas station with a pay-at-the-pump system old enough to make you enter your zip 3 times before it would work. None of it was proof of anything. It was just a pattern trying to introduce itself. Coda left the trunk only to nose along the container's interior wall, where rust had flaked to show older paint beneath. The dog paused, sniffed at a spot just bigger than Jack's hand, then pawed it once. A thin echo rang out, a different tone than the rest of the wall. Hollow, Jack thought, hating that the idea came so easily. He pressed his ear close. Nothing, just the blood beating at his temples. He backed away. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a detective. He was a man who changed brake pads and rebuilt carburetors and sometimes fixed lawnmower engines for neighbors who forgot to pay him back. He didn't know what he was allowed to touch, what would matter later if it came to that. If he called anybody, if he admitted out loud the thing he was almost ready to say. His phone buzzed in his pocket, making him jump hard enough that the album in his hand slid sideways. He fumbled it, caught it before it hit the floor. The screen showed a number he didn't recognize. No name, just a Texas area code. He let it ring. It went to voicemail and didn't leave one. Outside the container, a car rolled slow past on the road. The sound of tires on gravel has a character all its own, soft and gritty, like someone folding sand. Jack glanced out at the rectangle of light and saw a white sedan he didn't know, windows tinted, moving at a creep. It didn't stop. It just took its time, then eased on. He had neighbors, but not the kind who kept track of his schedules. People minded their business out here. A slow car on a weekday afternoon shouldn't have meant anything. Okay, Jack said, to Coda or to the creeping feeling coiling up his spine. Enough for today. Packing up felt like picking up the pieces of a broken picture frame without slicing your fingers. He tucked the albums back exactly as he'd found them. He closed the box and ran fresh tape over the old. He left the trunk alone because he owed himself one more attempt at denial. He swung the big doors shut and slid the lock home. The click of the shank seating in place sounded too loud in the yard. Evening came with a copper sky. Jack grilled a cheap cut of meat and a single ear of corn. Ate on the back steps while Coda lay at his feet, chin on paws, eyes never quite leaving the container. Crickets started up. A dog barked 2 properties over. Life pretended normal again. Inside, dishes washed and stacked, Jack turned on the TV and turned it back off after 8 minutes. He tried a book and found the words wouldn't hold still. He stood at the window and counted his breaths. When the first set of headlights washed the living room wall, he told himself it was the same slow white sedan rolling by again. People got lost. GPS hiccuped. Life gave you coincidences. The engine idled. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage like pebbles finding a drum. Coda rose without a sound and walked to the door. He put his nose to the crack and drew in the night. A second set of lights came from the other direction and didn't pass either. They held steady, 2 pale coins shining through the oak branches, then dimmed as if someone switched them off. Jack flipped the deadbolt, then checked himself. Old habit. He didn't want to make noise. He didn't want to do anything that would tell whoever was out there that he was watching too. He killed the lamp. The house went soft and blue. In the dark, the container sat out there like a docked ship, hull heavy, secret sealed. Something clinked. Metal, a quick, unforgiving sound. It came from the yard. Coda's bark shattered the quiet, not warning, not query. The kind of bark that says, I have seen the thing, and I will go through it if I have to. Jack grabbed the flashlight and the bat he kept by the door, a leftover from nights when his world had simpler dangers. He eased the door open and night air shouldered in, warm, cut with the smell of dust and summer grass. He stepped onto the porch. Coda surged past him, muscles bunched, nails throwing sparks on the first few inches of stone. The flashlight beam jittered across the yard and caught the container's doors. The lock hung exactly where he'd left it. But lower down, barely visible past the weeds, lay a shape in the dirt, something that hadn't been there an hour ago. Coda reached it first, nose pressed to it, then flicked his eyes up to Jack. The beam stopped. The object was a steel ring, half buried, attached to a short length of chain. Fresh scrape marks scarred the dirt where someone had dragged it from under the container. Then let it go. Who drags chain out of the dark and then leaves it in your grass? Jack tipped the beam toward the road. Dust still hung slow and ghost-like. No lights, no engine, just the crickets and the weight of Coda's breathing at his side. He felt it in his bones then, the thing that turned dread into decision. The container wasn't just a mystery, It was a message. Someone knew what it held, someone wanted it back, and someone had been close enough to touch it. He swallowed, hand tight on the bat, and said the thing he'd been avoiding all day. "We're going to need help." Jack didn't sleep. Not really. He lay in bed listening to the slow whirl of the ceiling fan and the low, steady breathing of Coda curled up near the door. Every time headlights touched the wall or gravel shifted outside, his chest clenched. It wasn't just the container now, it was the certainty that somebody else cared about it. Somebody who already knew where it was. By 5 a.m. the air was heavy, still black outside the window, the kind of Texas night that never quite cools off. Jack swung his legs to the floor and sat there a moment, elbows on knees, staring into the dark. Coda lifted his head without sound. "All right," Jack whispered. "We're not waiting anymore." He pulled jeans over tired legs, boots without socks, and grabbed the crowbar from behind the back door. Outside, cicadas still hummed though dawn was creeping up, painting the horizon gray. The container sat in the yard like a shadow too solid to ignore. Coda trotted ahead, fur glinting faint in the first light. His tail was stiff, his shoulders forward, every line of him focused. Jack fitted the flashlight under his arm and unlatched the padlock. The doors groaned open, metal against metal. Inside, the smell hit him harder than yesterday. Not rot, not mold exactly, but oldness baked in steel, like the breath of places left shut too long. The trunk waited in the corner, chained, padlocked, mute. Jack told himself a dozen reasons not to open it. He wasn't law enforcement. He didn't have a warrant. Maybe the right thing was to leave it for the sheriff. But every reason sounded like an excuse, and excuses had never sat right with him. If the photos meant what he thought they might mean, then what sat in that trunk was worse. And if someone had already been sniffing around last night, waiting might be the stupidest thing he could do. "Coda," his voice was rough. "Guard." The dog planted beside him, ears sharp, eyes on the door. Jack slid the crowbar under the chain, leveraged hard, and felt the tension groan through the steel. The lock snapped with a pop that cracked the morning silence. He swallowed and pulled the lid. The hinges screamed, then gave. Inside was not what he expected. No bodies, no bones, nothing that would have ended his life in a single instant. Instead, layers. First blankets, folded tight but smelling of mothballs and something sour. Beneath them, clothing. Children's clothing, dresses, jeans with cartoon patches, t-shirts small enough to fit kids no older than 10. Some looked worn, some almost new. Jack's hands shook as he pulled a shoe free, a red sneaker with the laces tied together. The sole worn crooked, the way kids wear them out when they run on one side. He turned it in his hand, unable to imagine a reason it should be here. Chained in the dark. Under the clothes were toys, not fancy ones, not shiny like store shelves. A stuffed bear missing an eye, a plastic fire truck with wheels snapped off, a puzzle with half the pieces gone. Jack set them back down fast, heart beating like a hammer. His breath came thin. He could lie to himself about the albums, maybe, but not this. Nobody stored things like this. Nobody kept these kinds of things chained up unless they were proof of something that should have never happened. Coda whined low, nose pressed near the trunk, chest vibrating with sound deeper than fear. Jack closed the lid halfway, then froze. At the bottom lay another box. Cardboard taped on all sides, edges yellow with age. He lifted it out, set it on the floor, and split the tape with the crowbar. Inside were binders, thick 3-ring binders, their covers plain, each stuffed with paper in clear sleeves. Jack slid one free and squinted at the top sheet. A list, names, dates, locations. He flipped. More names, more dates. Columns of numbers he didn't understand. Some pages had photographs clipped to them, faces of children, different towns scribbled in the corners. He felt his knees weaken. This wasn't junk. This was evidence. Meticulous, methodical evidence. The air inside the container suddenly felt too tight, pressing him toward panic. He jammed the binder back into the box, sealed it shut, and stumbled into the yard. The sun had cleared the horizon now, bathing the grass in gold. But the warmth didn't touch him. He bent, hands on knees, sucking air. Coda came to his side, pressing against his leg with the weight of a dog who knew how to ground a man. Jack didn't want to call the sheriff. That was the truth. Law meant paperwork, questions, courtrooms, things that never ended well for ordinary men who just stumbled into them. But ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. Not with binders full of names, not with someone circling the property in the night. He pulled his phone out, thumb hovering over the sheriff's number, saved from years back when his dad had been alive. Sheriff Maggie Thornton, older now, steady as an oak, known to everyone in Clearwater. She'd watched Jack grow up, knew his rough years, knew the way he'd never quite lived up to the Reynolds name. Would she believe him? Or would she think he was chasing ghosts trying to turn junk into drama? Coda nudged his thigh as if answering the question for him. Jack swore under his breath and hit the button. It rang 3 times. Thornton. Jack cleared his throat. Sheriff, it's Jack Reynolds. A pause. Morning, Jack. Trouble? Yeah, he said, and his voice cracked in a way that startled him. I need you to come by. It's serious. Serious how? He looked at the container, looked at Coda. I think I bought something I wasn't supposed to. Another pause, longer this time. He could picture her in her office, boots on the desk, eyes narrowing. I'll be there in 20. Don't touch anything else. While he waited, Jack tried to sit still. Tried the porch, tried the kitchen, ended up pacing the yard like a man burning a path. Coda stayed close, ears flicking at every bird and car. At one point, he trotted to the fence line and growled low, the sound vibrating through the boards. Jack followed the gaze and saw tire tracks, fresh ones, cutting through the ditch near his mailbox. He felt the cold settle deeper. Sheriff Thornton arrived in a cloud of dust, her cruiser crunching the gravel. She stepped out, wearing her hat low, her face carved with lines that spoke of years on duty. 2 deputies followed in another car. Jack, she said, eyes sweeping the yard, the container, his pale face. Show me. He did. She listened without interrupting, hands on her belt, jaw tight. When he opened the trunk for her, she didn't flinch, didn't gasp. She just bent, lifted one item, a child's sandal, and set it down with care. Where'd you get this? County auction. $300. Her eyes narrowed. And you just happened to pick it? Jack bristled. I didn't know what was inside. I'm not saying you did, she replied evenly. I'm saying it's strange. Containers don't just get auctioned without paperwork. One deputy photographed the contents. The other bagged the binders, his face pale under his hat. Sheriff Thornton straightened. You were right to call. This isn't junk. This is tied to cases we never solved. Missing kids? Jack asked, throat dry. Her silence was answer enough. Coda barked once, sharp, pulling their attention toward the road. The white sedan had returned. It slowed as it passed, then rolled on, tinted windows hiding the driver. Thornton's hand hovered near her holster. That yours? Jack shook his head. She muttered something low and sharp. We'll run the plates. Until then, don't go anywhere alone. Whoever owned this container won't be happy it changed hands. Jack stared at the steel box, the rust catching sunlight. He thought of the names in the binders, the photos, the toys. Lives reduced to records, hidden in the dark. Coda pressed against his leg again, steady and solid. For the first time, Jack said it out loud. We're in over our heads. Sheriff Thornton's gaze stayed on the road. Maybe, but you and that dog might have just cracked open the one thing this county's been waiting on for years. Jack didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who'd paid $300 for a nightmare. And he had the sinking feeling it was only the beginning. Jack had lived in Clearwater all his life, but that morning he felt like a stranger in his own town. Sheriff Thornton and her deputies had left an hour earlier. Binders boxed and sealed in the trunk of her cruiser. She promised to contact federal investigators, promised to keep him in the loop, promised that what he'd found mattered. But promises didn't change the way the air clung to him, heavy, watchful, as though someone else was breathing down his neck. Coda hadn't relaxed once. The dog stayed close, every muscle on alert, ears twitching at noises Jack usually ignored. Crows in the pecan trees, a distant truck down on the highway, a screen door slamming 2 properties over. Jack made coffee, but it tasted like tin. He set the cup aside and rubbed his eyes. The container sat in the yard, doors shut, padlock reset by the deputies. From the kitchen window, it looked no different than yesterday, a rectangle of rust and shadow. But Jack couldn't unsee what he'd touched inside. The trunk of toys and clothes, the binders thick with names, the photographs of children he didn't know. Every time he blinked, he saw that red sneaker in his hand, laces tied together. He tried to work. He'd brought home a carburetor from the shop, told himself he'd clean it up on the porch, keep his hands busy. But the smell of gasoline and cleaner mixed with something else, Something faint carried on the morning breeze. Sweet, rotten, metallic all at once. It turned his stomach before he even recognized it. Coda recognized it first. The dog lifted his nose high, sniffing sharp bursts of air. Then he growled. Jack froze. What is it, boy? Coda left the porch and trotted straight toward the container. Not the trunk this time. Not the boxes. The far end of the steel wall. He pressed his nose to the seam near the ground, inhaled again, then pawed. Jack set the carburetor down so fast it clattered across the wood. He followed, crouched beside the dog, and smelled it too, the faint trace of decay. He swallowed hard, bile rising. Jesus. Coda dug harder, nails clicking on rust. Jack caught his collar, pulling him back. Not yet, not until he cut himself off because what was he waiting for? Permission? Sheriff Thornton had told him not to touch anything else. But she was gone now, and the smell wasn't gone. It was stronger. If something was hidden in that wall, Jack ran a hand down his face. We just opened hell, didn't we? Coda barked once, sharp, insistent. He went to the shed for tools, hammer, chisel, flashlight. The sun was climbing, but the yard still felt dim, shadowed by something larger than weather. Jack returned to the container and crouched where Coda had dug. He tapped the metal. Hollow. He worked the chisel into the seam and hammered until rust cracked. A thin line widened, enough to slip fingers through. He pulled hard. The steel bent with a groan. Dust exploded out. The smell hit full force then. Not just decay, something worse. A sour, clinging stench that crawled into his throat and wouldn't leave. Jack gagged, stumbling back, hand over his mouth. Coda barked again, louder this time, tail rigid. When Jack steadied the flashlight and shone it inside, the beam caught wood. Not steel, a false wall, a compartment built into the container. He braced himself, pried wider, and peered through the gap. What he saw turned his blood cold. Inside the hidden space lay more belongings, backpacks lined up neat as if waiting for their owners. Faded superhero designs, a pink bag with glitter, a plain canvas one with initials inked in black. Each looked worn, carried. Each was small enough for a child. And next to them, jars, mason jars, dozens of them, sealed tight, labels in that same blocky handwriting he'd seen in the binders. Inside the cloudy glass floated hair, locks of it, different shades, different lengths, some tied with ribbons, some loose. Jack staggered back, nearly dropping the flashlight. His breath came ragged. He'd thought he was ready after the albums, the trunk, the binders. He wasn't. He slammed the beam off, dropped it in the grass, and bent over, hands on knees, retching until nothing came up. Coda pressed against him, whining now, a sound Jack had never heard from the dog before. Okay, Jack whispered, voice breaking. Okay, we're not doing this alone anymore. He called Thornton. This time her tone was clipped, urgent. Stay out of it, Jack. Back away. Do not go near that wall again. I'll get a team here within the hour. You don't understand, Jack said, clutching the phone. It's not just clothes and toys, it's worse. I said don't touch anything else. Her voice hardened. And Jack, stay inside your house. Lock your doors. If somebody's been circling, they know you opened it. The line went dead. Jack turned slowly toward the road. Dust hung there again, faint but rising, as though a car had just passed. He felt the prickle crawl his skin. Coda, he said, and the dog was already staring, hackles up. The hours stretched long. Jack tried the living room, the chair by the window, the back steps. Nowhere felt safe. He kept the bat close, phone closer. Coda patrolled the house, nose brushing every door seam, every curtain crack. At one point, he barked at the back fence, lunged hard enough that Jack had to shout him back. By the time he looked, nothing moved there but grass. At 10 a.m., a car rolled slow past again. Not the white sedan, a different one, blue, pickup, older model. Jack didn't recognize it. The driver never looked his way. Just passed, too slow, then gone. Jack's heart pounded anyway. He tried to distract himself, flipped through channels on the TV. News anchors talked about storms out east. None of it reached him. He muted the set. The silence was worse. Then a sound cut through, the unmistakable scrape of gravel under tires. Jack froze. Coda rose from the rug in one motion, muscles tight, ears pricked. He growled, low and steady. The sound stopped. Jack crept to the window and peered through the blinds. A white sedan sat at the end of his drive, engine running, headlights off. Tinted windows, same car. The driver didn't get out, just idled there as if waiting for him to make the first move. Jack's throat closed. He backed away, whispering, "Not now, not yet." Coda snarled, teeth bared, body pressed against the door as if daring Jack to open it. The sedan revved once, then rolled back onto the road and disappeared. Jack didn't sit after that. He stood, pacing, every nerve wired tight. When the knock came, he nearly swung the bat before realizing it was Thornton's voice. "Jack, it's me." He yanked the door. She stood with 3 federal agents, plain clothes but hard eyes. They carried equipment, gloves, evidence kits. Thornton glanced at his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Jack said hoarsely. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. The agents moved to the container, pried the wall wider, photographed, cataloged, bagged. Their expressions stayed professional, but Jack saw the flickers, tight jaws, eyes that wouldn't quite meet his. One agent muttered, "We've seen this before." Thornton cut him a sharp look. "Not here, you haven't." Jack leaned against the porch post, arms crossed, trying to steady his shaking hands. Coda sat at his feet, gaze locked on the yard. When the work was done, Thornton returned to him. "This goes beyond county lines, beyond state lines. We're looking at something organized." "I don't want to be part of this," Jack said, voice low. She studied him. "You already are." Jack swallowed. "What happens now?" Her jaw worked. "Now we follow the trail, and you watch your back. Whoever ran this, they're missing their container, and they'll know you opened it." She left then, convoy pulling out, dust swallowing them until the road went empty. Jack stood in the silence that followed, feeling smaller than he ever had. Coda pressed close again, warm and solid, the only anchor he had left. Jack looked at the container, rust glinting in the sun, and whispered, "We're in it now, boy. Deeper than I ever thought possible." And somewhere in the distance, faint and chilling, a car door slammed. The sun dropped behind the tree line, slow and heavy, staining the horizon the color of old copper. Jack sat on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, staring at the container in the yard. The thing looked the same as it had when he first dragged it home. Rusted seams, faded paint, padlock gleaming under the last light. But it wasn't the same. He knew too much now. Coda sprawled beside him, head up, ears twitching at every sound. The German shepherd wasn't restless. He was focused, alert. His whole body radiated the same message he'd been sending for days. "Something's wrong here, Jack. Don't let your guard down." Jack reached over and scratched the thick fur behind his ears. "You're not sleeping tonight either, huh?" The dog's tail thumped once, then stilled again. Jack had tried to follow the sheriff's advice, stay inside, keep the doors locked, wait for updates. But sitting still felt like punishment. The air around the house carried a tension he couldn't shake, like a storm building without thunder or lightning. He thought of the white sedan, the blue pickup, the fresh tire tracks at his mailbox. He thought of the smell behind the false wall, of the bars with locks of hair, of binders thick with names and faces. He thought of how Sheriff Thornton had looked at him before she left, her words heavy as iron. "You're already part of this." Jack dragged a hand across his face. "We're in deep, boy." Coda lifted his head, sniffed, then growled low. Jack froze. "What is it?" The dog's body stiffened, gaze locked toward the tree line that bordered the yard. Jack turned his head, straining his ears. At first, nothing but cicadas and the faint hum of the highway. Then he caught it, a crunch, faint but deliberate, of boots on gravel. Jack slipped inside and came back with the shotgun he kept for coyotes. He wasn't proud of how his hands trembled on the stock. He eased down the porch steps, flashlight in his other hand, Coda glued to his side. "Hello?" Jack called into the dark. His voice cracked, so he tried again, louder. "This is private property." Silence. Coda barked, sharp, the kind of bark that carried warning and promise. Something moved. A shadow broke loose from the trees and darted back into the dark. Jack swung the beam, but it caught only branches swaying. His chest hammered. "Who's out there?" Still nothing. Coda lunged forward, dragging the leash Jack had clipped on him, straining against it with a force that nearly yanked Jack off his feet. His bark turned savage, deep and guttural. Jack's finger itched on the trigger, but he forced himself still. Shooting blind into the night would solve nothing. The crunch of footsteps retreated, quicker this time, fading into silence. Jack exhaled hard, lowering the gun. His palms were slick. He crouched, pulling Coda close. "We're not alone, buddy. We're sure as hell not alone." Back inside, Jack locked every door and window, double-checked the deadbolts. He killed the lights, leaving only the faint glow of the TV screen he didn't bother turning up. He sat in the living room chair, shotgun across his lap, Coda stretched at his feet like a coiled spring. Hours crawled. Midnight came and went. Every time the wind shifted, Jack thought he heard movement outside. A car engine in the distance made him flinch. The ice maker clattered in the freezer and nearly tore his heart out. At 2 a.m., Coda stiffened. His ears pricked, nose lifted, a growl building deep in his chest. Jack leaned forward, straining to hear. Then he caught it, the faint metallic clink of something hitting the container doors. He shot to his feet, shotgun ready. Coda lunged to the door, barking furiously. Jack's throat was dry as dust. He edged to the window and peeled the curtain back an inch. Moonlight silvered the yard. The container sat like a tombstone. At first he saw nothing. Then, movement. A figure crouched at the doors, working at the padlock with tools. Jack's gut dropped. The man wasn't tall but stocky, dressed in dark clothes, a cap pulled low. He moved quick, practiced, as if this wasn't his first time picking a lock. Coda barked again, fierce and sharp, rattling the windows. The man froze, head snapping up. Even from the house, Jack felt the stranger's eyes searching the dark. Jack raised the shotgun and yanked the door open. "Get off my property!" he roared. The man bolted, sprinting for the trees. Jack fired into the air, the blast echoing through the fields like thunder. Coda lunged after the figure, but Jack's grip on the leash held. He didn't dare let the dog chase into the dark alone. The figure vanished into the tree line. Silence dropped heavy, broken only by Coda's savage barking. Jack's whole body shook. He backed inside, locked the door again, and leaned against it, the shotgun heavy in his arms. Coda paced, whining now, frustrated at being held back. Jack knelt, pressing his forehead against the dog's. "You saved us, boy. You saved us." He grabbed his phone with trembling hands and called Thornton. She answered it on the second ring, voice sharp with sleep but instantly awake. "What happened?" "Someone was here," Jack rasped, tried to open the container. Her breath hissed through the line. "Did you see him?" "Yeah, couldn't get a clear look. But he knew what he was doing. I fired a warning shot. He ran." "I'll send deputies out now," she said. "Stay put. Don't open the door for anyone but us." The deputies arrived 20 minutes later, lights flashing blue across the yard. They swept the area, but the intruder was long gone. Only fresh footprints in the dirt, leading to the trees, proved Jack hadn't imagined it. Thornton herself showed up not long after. She studied the prints, lips pressed thin. "They'll be back," she said. Jack swallowed. "For the container?" "For what's in it," she corrected grimly. She met his eyes then, steady and serious. "You need to understand something, Jack. You didn't just stumble onto somebody's junk. This is evidence, valuable evidence. And the kind of people who keep things like this, they don't stop easy." Jack tightened his grip on the shotgun. "Then what do I do?" "Keep breathing," she said, "and keep that dog close. He may be the reason you're alive right now." When the cruisers finally left, the house felt too big, too empty. Jack sat again in the chair, shotgun never leaving his hands. Coda settled at his feet, eyes burning toward the window, every inch of him ready. Jack stared at the container through the glass until his eyelids burned. He whispered, $300, boy. $300, and we bought ourselves a war." Coda's ears flicked. Outside, the wind rustled the pecan trees. But the silence that followed was heavy, and Jack knew it wasn't peace. It was a pause. The kind of pause that meant the real trouble hadn't even started. Morning broke with the uneasy quiet of a battlefield after a fight. Jack hadn't closed his eyes once. The shotgun still sat across his lap, heavy as stone, and Coda lay by the door, awake the whole night, ears twitching at every creak of the house. The deputies had come and gone. Sheriff Thornton had promised extra patrols, but the silence in the yard told Jack one thing plain. Whoever wanted that container wasn't finished. He brewed coffee stronger than tar and leaned against the counter while Coda ate his kibble in quick gulps. The dog's head snapped up twice, mid-bite. When a car passed on the gravel road outside, Jack felt the same jolt each time. He knew they were being watched. "This is no way to live," Jack muttered. "We need more than county deputies cruising by twice a night." Coda licked his muzzle and stared toward the yard as if agreeing. By 9 o'clock, Sheriff Thornton rolled into the drive in her county cruiser. She stepped out in pressed khakis and boots that had seen more miles than most men's trucks. Her face looked drawn, like she hadn't slept either. "Morning," she said. "Not much of one," Jack replied. She scanned the container, then the yard. "We're bringing in outside help." Jack frowned. "Feds?" She nodded. "Evidence like this crosses state lines. We're talking FBI, maybe Homeland. You stumbled onto something that's bigger than all of us, Jack." His gut tightened. He'd suspected it, but hearing it out loud made the ground feel less steady. Thornton gestured for him to follow. "Show me again." They walked to the container. Jack unlocked the padlock with stiff hands. The doors groaned open. Sunlight spilled across the heap of junk in the shadowed corner where the false wall had been pried back. The stench still lingered faint, metallic, and sour, as though the steel itself had soaked it up. Thornton didn't flinch. She stepped close, flashlight in hand, crouched at the gap, and peered into the hidden space. Same as last night, but worse knowing it's still here. Coda patted forward, sniffed, then scratched at the dirt floor by the wall. His claws clinked against something buried shallow. Jack crouched. "What is it, boy?" He scraped at the packed earth until metal showed, a small square plate bolted into the container's floor. He pried it up with the chisel he'd left nearby. Beneath it lay a compartment no bigger than a shoebox. Inside, another binder. Thornton's jaw tightened as she flipped it open. This one was different. No photos, no toys, just ledger entries, dates, and amounts. Money moved, cities listed, bank codes. "This is it," she murmured. "Proof of trafficking, payments, routes. Jack, this is the spine of a network." He felt his stomach lurch. "You saying that container was a piece of a system?" She looked at him steadily. "I'm saying it wasn't random. It was part of an operation." Jack exhaled hard, raking a hand through his hair. "And now it's in my yard." By noon, unmarked SUVs rolled up the drive. 3 federal agents climbed out, all in plain clothes but carrying the kind of weight you recognize even without badges. Their leader, Special Agent Carter, shook Jack's hand firmly, eyes sharp. "Mr. Reynolds, we've been briefed. You did the right thing calling your sheriff." Jack gave a humorless laugh. "Doesn't feel like it." Carter studied him. "It will. You've cracked open something we've been chasing for a long time." They moved fast, photographing every inch, bagging the binders, dusting surfaces for prints. Coda shadowed them, alert, barking once when one agent knocked over a box too roughly. Jack tried to stand back, but every item pulled from the shadows made his chest tighten. At one point, Carter pulled out a notebook hidden under a collapsed chair. He flipped it open, scanned a page, and his expression changed. "This name," he said quietly. "It matches a cold case out of Oklahoma." Thornton stepped closer. "Child?" "Yeah," Carter said grimly. "Missing 5 years." Jack felt the weight of it drop into his gut like a stone. When the agents finally stepped back, Carter closed his binder and looked at Jack. "Here's what you need to know. Whoever ran this isn't small time. They had storage, transport, coded records. And they're going to realize real soon that we've got a piece of their playbook." Jack swallowed. "And I'm the one who bought it." "Exactly, which means you're on their radar now." He didn't need reminding. He'd felt those eyes watching for days. That night, Thornton insisted on leaving 2 deputies parked at the end of Jack's drive. Their cruisers sat with lights dark, silhouettes just visible from the porch. Jack grilled burgers to calm his nerves. Coda sat on the steps, nose twitching at the air, gaze flicking between the container and the road. When the meat was done, Jack split one patty and dropped it into Coda's bowl. "Best I can do for a partner," he said, trying to smile. The dog ate quickly, then returned to his vigil. Jack chewed slowly, mind racing. He wanted to believe the presence of federal agents and deputies meant safety, but the pit in his stomach said otherwise. Later, he sat in the living room, TV murmuring low. The house felt too quiet. He glanced at the clock, past midnight. The deputies' cars still sat at the end of the drive, but distance made them feel like decorations, not shields. Coda stirred suddenly, ears twitching. He rose, padded to the back door, and whined low. Jack muted the TV. "What is it, boy?" The sound came faint at first. A rustle, then a scrape. Jack eased to the window and peeked out. Moonlight cast the yard in silver. The container sat still, hulking. But in the shadows near the fence, something shifted. A figure crouched low, moving along the fence line, testing the boards. Jack's blood went cold. He grabbed the shotgun and whispered, "Stay close." Coda was already there, body taut, teeth bared. Before Jack could decide whether to call Thornton or fire a warning shot, headlights flared. One of the deputies at the drive flipping on his cruiser lights. Red and blue washed the trees. The figure bolted, sprinting for the ditch, disappearing into the dark. Jack burst onto the porch, shotgun raised, but it was over too quick. The deputies tore down the road, chasing shadows. Thornton arrived 15 minutes later, hair mussed from sleep, fury burning in her eyes. "They're testing us," she said flatly. "Pushing, probing, waiting for you to slip." Jack's chest heaved. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "No," she said. "Not until they know what we've found is out of their hands." She looked down at Coda, who still bristled, gaze fixed on the tree line. She knelt, scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," she murmured. Then to Jack, "Stay sharp. This dog may be your first line of defense." When she left again, Jack sat on the steps in the night air, shotgun across his lap. The container loomed, silent and terrible. Coda pressed against his leg, steady and warm. Jack stared into the trees, whispering, "We didn't ask for this, boy. But we're in it now, and we're not backing down." Somewhere in the dark, an owl called. Then silence again. But Jack knew that silence was temporary. The storm was coming. Jack never thought silence could be so loud. After the deputies left, the night settled over his place like a heavy quilt. But it wasn't comforting. Every creak of the boards, every rustle of the pecan trees outside made his chest tighten. He sat with the shotgun across his lap, but it was the German shepherd at his feet who gave him courage. Coda never slept. The dog's eyes glowed in the dim light, ears pricked, ready to move at the first sign of trouble. By dawn, Jack's nerves were strung thin. He brewed coffee, poured it into a chipped mug, and watched the horizon bleed pink and orange. Coda ate without looking away from the yard, every bite quick and efficient. The container sat there still, locked and silent, but Jack swore he could feel it breathing, like it carried its own pulse, its own memory. Around mid-morning, Sheriff Thornton returned, this time with the FBI team in tow. 3 SUVs rolled up, dust trailing behind them. Special Agent Carter stepped out first, his expression serious as always, clipboard tucked under one arm. He didn't waste words. "Mr. Reynolds," Carter said, "we need to go back inside that container, carefully this time." Jack felt the weight drop into his stomach again. "Haven't we found enough already?" Carter shook his head. "We're only scratching the surface. If this was part of a larger system, there will be more. Records, markings, things we can use to track the rest of the network." Jack looked at the container. His throat felt tight, but he nodded. "Then let's do it." They opened the doors, the hinges groaning like a warning. The agents moved inside, cameras flashing, gloves on, every item handled with surgical precision. Jack stayed at the threshold with Thornton, Coda pressed to his leg. One agent crouched low, flashlight sweeping the steel walls. He paused, leaned closer. "Agent Carter, over here." Carter joined him. Jack strained to see what had caught their eye. The agent angled the light just right, and faint scratches appeared. Letters etched into the wall, carved with something sharp. Jack's chest clenched. The marks weren't random. They were initials. Children's initials, scrawled in desperation, pressed into steel as if leaving proof behind. Beneath one set of letters was a date, 2016. Thornton whispered, "Oh my God." Carter's jaw set. They were here, at least some of them, alive long enough to scratch their names. Jack felt sick, his vision blurred. He had known, deep down he had known, but seeing those marks made it real in a way the binders and photos hadn't. These weren't just records. This was where the children had been kept. Coda whined low, his nose brushing the carved letters as if he too understood. Carter turned to Jack. "Do you recognize these initials? Did you see them in the binders?" Jack shook his head. "I didn't look long enough. I couldn't." Thornton touched the wall gently, tracing the letters with her gloved hand. "This ties the container directly to the victims. This isn't just evidence, it's a crime scene." The words hit Jack like a hammer. He wanted to walk away, to close the doors and pretend he'd never bought the damn thing. But he couldn't. It was in his yard. He was in it now, whether he liked it or not. The agents continued working. One uncovered more markings along the floor seam, tiny scratches like tally marks, lines counted in groups of 5. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Jack's knees buckled. He stepped back into the sunlight, sucking air. Coda followed, pressing close to steady him. Thornton came out a minute later. "You all right?" He shook his head. "No, not even close." She gave a grim nod. "Didn't figure you would be. But Jack, what you did, calling us, keeping it safe, may be the reason some of these kids finally get justice." Jack looked at her, bitter. Justice doesn't give them back their years. No, she said softly, but it gives their families answers, and it takes down the ones who did this. That afternoon, Carter spread the binders and ledgers across Jack's kitchen table. He and his team pored over every page, whispering about patterns and networks. Jack hovered nearby, not wanting to hear but unable to leave. Finally, Carter pointed at a column. These notes aren't random, they're drop points. Storage containers, like the one you bought, spread across state lines. Each one assigned to a handler. This isn't a single operation, it's a system. Jack's stomach twisted. You're saying there are more containers like this? Carter's eyes met his. Yes, dozens, maybe more. Some active, some abandoned. And you just gave us the roadmap. Jack staggered back a step, his mug of coffee sloshing onto the floor. Coda barked once, sharp, as if echoing his shock. By evening, the house buzzed with quiet urgency. Agents came and went, radioing updates, loading evidence into SUVs. Thornton lingered near the door, speaking low to Jack when Carter wasn't listening. They're in this now, Jack. You've done your part. Let them carry it. Jack looked out at the container, its silhouette long and dark in the fading light. You think they'll stop coming around? The ones who want it back? Thornton's mouth tightened. No, they won't stop until they're caught. And until then, you need to keep that dog close and stay alert. That night, when the agents finally pulled out, Jack sat again on the porch steps, shotgun across his knees. Coda pressed to his side, eyes glowing in the dark. The air felt colder than usual, thick with things unseen. He whispered, "We're in deeper than I ever thought, boy, and I don't know how we come out the other side." Coda gave a low, steady rumble, not quite a growl, more like reassurance. Jack leaned into the sound. The pecan trees whispered with the wind. Somewhere down the road, a car door slammed. Jack stiffened, heart in his throat. He realized then that this wasn't just about one container, one discovery. It was bigger, uglier, and closer than he wanted to believe. And the worst part? The fight had only just begun. Jack had lived plenty of long days in his life, working the shop from dawn until past dark, fixing cars that should have been left for the junkyard. But nothing stretched time like waiting after you'd learned the truth. Every tick of the clock carried weight. Every sound outside could be a threat. By the time the FBI called back, confirming what the ledgers pointed to, Jack felt like a man sitting on top of a powder keg. Special Agent Carter stood in Jack's kitchen late that afternoon, maps spread across the table. Red pins dotted highways stretching out from Texas into Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Each pin represented a container, a drop point, a hub. Some were still active. This one, Carter said, tapping near Dallas, matches dates and codes in the ledger you uncovered. If it's still in use, there's a chance we find survivors. The word hit Jack like a fist. Survivors. After all the darkness inside his container, the toys, the scratched initials, the jars, could there really be kids still alive? Thornton leaned on the table, her face pale but steady. We're going after it? Carter nodded. Tonight, before they move it again, we've got agents assembling, but we'll need someone who knows what to expect. His eyes flicked to Coda, lying on the floor by Jack's boots, head resting on his paws but eyes sharp. Jack bristled. He's retired. Carter shook his head. He's trained. He knew before any of us what was buried in that steel. If there are kids inside another container, Coda may be the only one who finds them fast enough. Jack looked down at the shepherd, who raised his head at the sound of his name. Ears pricked. The dog was ready. Jack wasn't sure he was. By nightfall, they caravanned toward Dallas. Black SUVs, one county cruiser, and Jack's old pickup bringing up the rear. Coda rode shotgun, staring out the window, body tense. Jack's palms sweated against the wheel. He had no badge, no authority, and no reason to be there, except for Coda. Carter's voice came over the radio. Sights an abandoned warehouse. Containers inside. Intel says guards rotate every 6 hours. We move in hard and fast. Jack's stomach churned. He wasn't cut out for raids. But when he glanced at Coda, he saw calm determination in those amber eyes. The dog had done this before. Jack just had to keep up. They parked 2 blocks out, lights off. The air smelled of asphalt and rain on dust. Carter motioned with 2 fingers, and agents fanned into the shadows. Thornton stayed close to Jack. You stick with me. If things go south, you get down and stay down. Understood? Jack nodded, throat dry. Understood. Then Carter opened the tailgate of an SUV and clipped a vest onto Coda. The big white letters across the side read K9. Jack felt his heart swell and ache all at once. Coda wore it like he'd never taken it off. "Ready, boy," Jack whispered. The shepherd wagged once, low and quick, then leaned into the leash like he knew where they were going. They breached just after midnight. The warehouse doors blew open under a battering ram, agents flooding inside with shouts of FBI and beams of light cutting through dust. Jack stumbled in behind Thornton, shotgun clutched but useless compared to the rifles in every agent's hands. The air smelled of oil, rust, and something sour, something human. Coda surged forward, nose working, barking once, sharp and decisive. He pulled left, dragging Jack toward a stack of pallets. Behind them, tucked into shadow, sat a container almost identical to the one Jack had bought. Carter barked orders. "Open it!" Agents swarmed, bolt cutters snapping the padlock, chains rattling to the ground. The doors groaned wide. The smell hit first, stale air, sweat, fear. Then came the sound. Small cries, muffled gasps, voices too weak to scream. Inside were children, half a dozen at least, huddled in the dark, eyes wide against the sudden light. They looked thin, dirty, clothes torn, but alive. Jack's knees gave out. He leaned against the wall, vision swimming. Coda barked furiously, pushing forward, tail high, trying to reach the kids. One girl, maybe 8 years old, reached back, tiny hands stretching toward him. "It's okay," Thornton shouted, kneeling low, her voice steady and calm. "You're safe now. You're safe." Agents moved fast, pulling the children out, wrapping them in blankets, checking pulses, whispering reassurances. Jack could barely breathe, watching them emerge one by one. He felt tears burning hot down his face. He hadn't cried in years. Not like this. Coda pressed against him, whining, then looked back at the children as if to say, "This is why." The raid ended in chaos, agents hauling out evidence, securing suspects, radios crackling with updates. A handful of men were cuffed, dragged out swearing. Carter's face stayed cold, but Jack saw his fists clench. "Is this it?" Jack asked him, voice rough. "Did we just shut it down?" Carter shook his head grimly. "This is one piece. But now we have proof. Now we know the network is active." Jack swallowed hard. "How many more containers?" Carter didn't answer. They drove back at dawn, the sky streaked with purple and gold. Jack rode in silence, one hand resting on Coda's back. The shepherd finally lay down, eyes half closed, body spent. But Jack could still feel the tension humming in him like a live wire. Back home, he parked the truck and sat a long time before going inside. The container still squatted in his yard, rust catching the sunrise. He hated it more than ever, but he also knew it had been the key. $300 had cracked open a secret that saved lives. Jack looked at Coda, who climbed down from the seat and padded toward the house, still alert even in exhaustion. "You did it, boy," Jack whispered. "You were the hero here, not me." Coda glanced back, amber eyes steady, then trotted ahead. Jack sat on the porch that night, shotgun across his knees out of habit. But for the first time in days, the air felt a little lighter. Thornton had promised federal teams would keep circling, that the kids from the raid were safe in hospitals, with social workers who would fight for them. He knew the fight wasn't over. He knew more storms were coming. But for that night, knowing those children were alive, that was enough. He rested a hand on Coda's fur and stared at the stars. $300, he murmured, and somehow we bought ourselves a piece of justice.